Researchers at Johns Hopkins University spent 8 years following more than 10,000 adults over the age of 60, tracking how everyday habits affected spinal health as people aged. What they discovered in 2023 changed how many clinicians think about age-related spine degeneration. A shocking 67% of seniors who developed early spinal compression and disc degeneration shared one hidden daily habit: not genetics, not heavy lifting, not previous injury. One ordinary behavior repeated for hours every day, something most people over 60 do without a second thought, sometimes for hours at a time, that is quietly and systematically destroying the structural integrity of the spine. As a radiologist scanning thousands of spines, one of the most heartbreaking things I see on those images is damage that didn't have to happen. Damage that was built slowly, silently, by something the patient was doing every single day. Today I'm going to show you exactly what that habit is, why it causes irreversible structural damage after 60, and what you can do to stop it before your spine reaches a point of no return. Not someday, now. My name is Dr. Ivy Ellington. I am radiologist with years of experience in musculoskeletal and spinal imaging. For the past years, I have worked exclusively in a senior imaging unit, which means the vast majority of patients whose X-rays, bone density scans, and spinal MRIs cross my screen every single day are adults over the age of 60. What I do is look at the evidence, the real, unfiltered evidence of what is happening inside your spine. And after many years of reading these images, and I can tell you this with complete confidence, the damage I see most often is not random. It is not inevitable. And in most cases, it traces back to the same root cause, something happening outside the clinic, inside everyday life. My goal today is to give you what no one has ever shown you, the view from inside your own spine, the anatomy lesson that explains exactly what is happening to your discs, your vertebrae, and your spinal nerves, and why what you do in the next few weeks either slows that damage or accelerates it past the point where the body can compensate. Before we get there, drop a comment with your age and where you are watching me from and tell me about your experience. There is no judgment here. Most people causing damage to their spines are doing so without any awareness at all. That changes today. And to understand why this habit can quietly damage the spine, we need to start with a simple truth about the human body. The spine was never designed to remain still for long periods of time. Your spine is built for movement, shifting loads, and constant micro-adjustments. Walking, standing, bending, and turning all create small changes in pressure across the vertebrae and discs. These constant adjustments help distribute stress evenly across the structure of the spine. But when a person sits for long stretches, something very different happens. Instead of pressure moving across different areas of the spine, a large portion of body weight becomes concentrated on the lower lumbar region, especially the L4 and L5 vertebrae and the discs between them. And the longer that posture remains unchanged, the more that pressure accumulates in the same area. Now imagine repeating that pattern every day for years. 3 hours watching television, another hour sitting at meals, time spent reading, resting, or scrolling through a phone, long car rides or travel. Individually, none of these moments seem harmful, but the spine experiences them as extended periods of continuous compression. This compression affects one structure in particular, the intervertebral discs. These discs are the shock absorbers of the spine. They sit between each vertebra and are designed to absorb pressure while allowing flexibility. Inside each disc is a gel-like center, surrounded by tough outer fibers that help distribute load. Under normal movement, discs behave like sponges. When you move, pressure shifts across them, and allowing fluid and nutrients to circulate in and out of the tissue. This circulation helps maintain their height, flexibility, and shock-absorbing ability. But when someone sits for long, uninterrupted periods, the discs stay compressed in the same position. Fluid exchange slows down. Over time, the discs can gradually lose hydration and elasticity. They begin becoming thinner and less resilient. This change does not happen overnight. It develops slowly across years of repeated compression. As the discs lose height, the vertebrae above and below them begin carrying more of the load directly. And that's when the spine starts adapting. The bones may develop small structural changes to stabilize the area. Joints between vertebrae may begin experiencing greater friction. Ligaments may tighten as the body tries to compensate for the shifting mechanics. Many people never notice this process happening. They only notice small signals. A back that feels stiff when standing after sitting. A dull ache in the lower spine at the end of the day. A feeling that it takes a few steps before the back loosens up. These symptoms are often dismissed because they don't seem severe. But in imaging, these early signals sometimes correspond with structural changes already forming in the spine. And here's the difficult part. Once disc height is significantly reduced or vertebral stress patterns become established, reversing the structural changes becomes extremely difficult. The spine can be managed, strengthened, and protected, but restoring its original structure becomes far more challenging. That's why the most important stage is the silent stage, when the spine is still capable of adapting positively if movement patterns change. Unfortunately, this is also the stage when most people ignore the warning signs. Because the habit causing the problem doesn't feel dangerous. It feels comfortable. It feels relaxing. And for many seniors, it feels like the natural way to spend the day. But inside the spine, the body is quietly responding to that pattern, slowly reshaping the structures that allow us to stand, move, and stay independent as we age. Understanding this process is the first step to stopping it. Most people believe spinal deterioration after 60 is simply the result of aging, that the discs naturally wear down, the vertebrae naturally compress, and the pain that follows is simply the price of getting older. That belief is not just wrong, it is dangerous. Because it causes millions of people to accept damage that is being actively driven by something entirely within their control. Let me be direct with you. Your spine does not deteriorate because you are 60. It deteriorates because of what is being done to it, repeatedly, daily, across years. While the aging process makes it increasingly less capable of absorbing and recovering from that stress, here is what changes after 60 that makes this so critical to understand. The discs between your vertebrae are not bone. They are soft, hydrated, shock-absorbing structures, each one functioning like a pressurized cushion that separates your vertebrae, protects your spinal nerves, and distributes the load your spine carries throughout the day. In your 30s and 40s, those discs are roughly 80% water. They compress under load and rehydrate during rest. They are resilient, adaptive, and extraordinarily capable of recovering from daily stress. After 60, that equation changes dramatically. The discs begin to lose their hydration capacity. The outer fibrous ring surrounding each disc, called the annulus fibrosus, becomes stiffer, less elastic, and far more vulnerable to cracking under sustained or repeated pressure. The internal gel-like core, the nucleus pulposus, begins to thin. The disc's ability to rehydrate overnight diminishes. Recovery slows, and the cumulative pressure that your discs could once absorb and bounce back from now begins to leave permanent marks. This is the biological window that makes the habit we're about to discuss so particularly devastating after 60. It is not that the habit suddenly becomes harmful, and it is that the spine's ability to recover from it has quietly collapsed, while the habit itself continues unchanged. One of the biggest myths in senior spinal health is that disc damage and vertebral compression appear suddenly. They don't. By the time a patient feels the burning in their leg, the stiffness that won't release, the dull ache that follows them from morning to night, the structural damage on the scan is already years, sometimes a decade in the making. The pain is not the beginning of the problem. The pain is the moment the spine finally runs out of ways to hide the problem. And here is what makes this particularly alarming. The habit driving this damage is not strenuous. It does not feel dangerous. It does not require lifting, twisting, or any form of physical exertion. In fact, many people over 60 engage in it precisely because it feels like rest, because it feels safe, because it feels like the responsible, low-impact choice for a body that needs to take it easy. That is the deception at the heart of this damage. The spine is not crying out while it is happening. The pressure is being applied slowly, consistently, and in a direction that the post-60 disc is structurally the least equipped to handle. Compressive, sustained, and concentrated at the very junctions of the spine that carry the greatest load. Here's the critical threshold you need to understand. Spinal disc damage exists on a spectrum. In the early stages, the disc thins, but the structural integrity holds. The nerves have space. The vertebrae are still separated. At this stage, the damage is manageable, and in many cases, we're progressible no further with the right changes. But once the disc collapses past a certain point, once the vertebrae begin making contact, once the nerve channels begin to narrow, once the surrounding ligaments begin compensating by calcifying, the window for meaningful intervention closes. What was manageable becomes structural. What was structural becomes permanent. That is the line we are trying to keep you on the right side of. And the first step is understanding exactly what is pushing so many people over 60 across that line, quietly, daily, and completely without warning. Let me tell you about Ronald. Ronald was 71 years old, retired civil engineer, the kind of man who prided himself on staying active. He mowed his own lawn, fixed things around the house, and walked his dog every evening without fail. Then he had no significant medical history, no surgeries, no major injuries, just a gradually worsening stiffness in his lower back that he had been quietly managing for about 3 years with over-the-counter pain relief and the firm conviction that it would eventually sort itself out. It didn't. When Ronald finally came in for imaging, his lower back pain had progressed to the point where the evening walks had stopped. The dog was going out without him. He couldn't sit through a full meal at the dinner table without shifting uncomfortably in his chair, and twice in the previous month he had woken in the middle of the night with a sharp electric pain radiating from his lower spine down through his right buttock and into his leg, a sign that the nerve compression had moved well beyond the disc itself. On his scan told a story I recognized immediately. The disc between L3 and L4 had lost nearly 40% of its original height. The L4 to L5 junction, the most load-sensitive point in the lumbar spine, showed advanced thinning with early contact between the vertebral end plates. The facet joints on the right side were inflamed and beginning to calcify, and the nerve root exiting at that level was visibly compressed, not by a sudden herniation, but by the slow, relentless narrowing of the space around it. When I walked Ronald through the images, he sat quietly for a long moment. Then he asked the question almost every patient in his position asks: "How did it get this bad without me feeling it sooner?" I told him what I tell every patient who asks that question. The spine is extraordinarily good at compensating. It redistributes load. It recruits surrounding muscles to absorb pressure the disc can no longer handle. It adapts until it can't. And the habit that had been loading Ronald's spine in exactly the wrong way, for exactly the wrong duration, every single day, had been doing so for years before the compensation finally broke down. When we identified the habit and Ronald eliminated it, replacing it with a simple structural adjustment that took less than 2 minutes to implement, the progression stopped. His nerve pain reduced significantly within 6 weeks. He didn't recover the disc height he had lost. That damage was permanent. But the advancement halted. The nightly pain eased. 3 months later, he was back to his evening walks. He told me at his follow-up appointment, "I just wish someone had shown me that scan 5 years ago." That is exactly why we are having this conversation today, before the window closes, while the damage is still on the right side of that line. Here's how this damage actually works. And I want you to understand this not as abstract biology, but as a precise mechanical sequence that is happening inside your spine right now, every single day, in response to one specific and entirely preventable input. Your spine is not a rigid column. It is a dynamic load-distributing system built from 33 vertebrae, 23 intervertebral discs, a network of stabilizing ligaments, and the deep postural muscles that hold the entire structure in alignment. Under healthy conditions, this system is remarkably capable. It absorbs impact, transfers load, or protects the spinal cord and nerve roots, and allows the full range of motion your body requires for daily life. The key to that entire system functioning correctly is spinal curvature. A healthy spine, viewed from the side, does not run in a straight vertical line. It has 3 natural curves: a forward curve in the neck, a backward curve in the mid-back, and a forward curve again in the lower back. These curves are not aesthetic. They are structural. They are the spine's primary mechanism for distributing load away from the discs and across the entire system. When those curves are maintained, the pressure on each disc is balanced, manageable, and well within the disc's capacity to absorb and recover from. Now here is where the mechanism of damage begins. When the spine is held in a flexed forward position, chin dropped, upper back rounded, lower back flattened, those natural curves collapse. The load that was previously distributed across the entire spinal system becomes concentrated. Specifically, it is driven forward into the anterior portion of each disc, the front face of that pressurized cushion between your vertebrae. The pressure on the front of the disc increases dramatically. The back of the disc is simultaneously placed under tension, and the nucleus pulposus, that gel-like core, is forced backward toward the posterior wall of the disc and toward the nerve roots that exit the spine at every level. Now here is the variable that makes this catastrophic after 60 specifically. In a younger spine, this forward flexed loading is tolerable for moderate durations because the disc is hydrated, elastic, but incapable of redistributing that pressure and recovering fully during rest. After 60, the disc has lost a significant portion of that hydration and elasticity. The annulus fibrosus, the tough outer ring, has stiffened and developed microscopic fissures from decades of use. The nucleus can no longer redistribute pressure as efficiently. Recovery overnight is slower and increasingly incomplete. So what happens when a dehydrated, stiffened, partially compromised disc is placed under sustained anterior compressive load? Not once, not occasionally, but for extended periods, repeatedly, every single day. The disc thins. The vertebrae above and below begin to move closer together. The space through which the spinal nerves exit, the foramen, narrows. The nerve roots begin to experience pressure, and the body, in an attempt to stabilize the collapsing structure, begins calcifying the surrounding ligaments and forming bone spurs along the vertebral edges, which narrows the spinal canal further and makes the nerve compression progressively worse. Think of it like this. Imagine a water balloon placed between two heavy books. When you press down directly from above, the balloon compresses but holds its shape. The pressure is distributed across the entire surface. Now tilt those books forward so the pressure is concentrated on one edge of the balloon. Apply that same pressure consistently, every day, for months and years. The edge of the balloon begins to thin, crack, and eventually collapse, while the opposite edge bulges outward under the redirected internal pressure. Well, that is precisely what sustained forward spinal flexion does to the intervertebral disc after 60. The books are your vertebrae. The balloon is your disc. And the thing tilting those books forward, hour after hour, day after day, is the habit we are about to name. Because here is the critical truth that changes everything. It is not the force of the load that destroys the disc after 60. It is the duration, the position, and the relentless repetition. And that combination has one primary, modern, and almost universally overlooked source. Now, here is where most people say, but I don't have a physically demanding job. I don't lift heavy things. I don't do anything that should be hurting my spine. Most of my patients say exactly that, and they are right. That is precisely the problem. The worst habit destroying your spine after 60 is not something strenuous. It is not something most people would ever think to question. In fact, if I asked you right now to list the habits most likely to be damaging your spine, I am willing to bet that this one would not appear anywhere on that list. The habit quietly damaging the spine of many adults over 60 is prolonged, uninterrupted sitting. Not sitting occasionally, not resting after activity. Those things are normal and healthy. The real problem is sitting for long stretches without movement, repeated day after day for years. Not sitting occasionally, not sitting for a reasonable period of rest, but the specific pattern of extended, uninterrupted sitting that has become the defining posture of modern daily life, in chairs that were never designed for spinal health, in positions the post-60 spine is structurally the least equipped to tolerate, for durations that would have been virtually impossible for any previous generation to accumulate. I want to be precise about what I mean, because this is not a general warning about being sedentary. This is a specific, mechanically defined threat. The dangerous pattern looks like this. You wake up. You sit for breakfast. You sit in the car. You sit watching the morning news. You sit for lunch. You sit reading, browsing, watching television in the afternoon. You sit for dinner. You sit for the rest of the evening. And across that day, the total duration of uninterrupted spinal flexion, the accumulated time your lumbar curve was flattened, your discs were loaded anteriorly, and your spinal nerves were under compression, may easily exceed 8, 10, or even 12 hours, and the chair makes it worse. Most standard chairs, sofas, recliners, dining chairs, car seats, place the hips below the knees or level with them, which automatically rotates the pelvis backward, flattens the lumbar curve, and locks the spine into exactly the forward flexed position that concentrates maximum pressure on the anterior disc wall. You are not choosing to load your spine incorrectly. The furniture is doing it for you, passively, every time you sit down. Now here is the detail that most people never hear, and it is the one that changes everything. It is not the act of sitting that destroys the disc. It is the duration without interruption. Research in spinal biomechanics has demonstrated consistently that intervertebral disc pressure under sustained seated flexion does not plateau. It continues to accumulate. The longer the uninterrupted sitting period, the greater the internal disc pressure, the more the nucleus is forced posteriorly, and the less capable the disc becomes of redistributing that load, because the sustained compression is simultaneously squeezing the very fluid the disc needs to recover. After 60, the recovery window is already compromised. When you add 6, 8, or 10 hours of sustained anterior disc loading on top of a spine that can no longer fully rehydrate overnight, you are not giving the damage time to stabilize between sessions. You are compounding it every single day. And here is the cruelest aspect of this villain. Sitting feels like rest. For a person whose back aches, whose legs are tired, whose body is asking for relief, sitting feels like the responsible, protective choice. It feels like you are taking care of yourself. But for the post-60 disc, prolonged sitting is not rest. It is the primary source of the damage itself. The relief is an illusion. The pressure is real, and it is accumulating with every minute that passes without interruption. This is why the damage is so advanced by the time it becomes painful, because the habit that is causing it feels like its own remedy. Now here is the empowering truth, and this is critical. The villain is named. It is specific, it is common, and it is absolutely, completely within your power to disrupt. You do not need surgery. You do not need medication. You do not need expensive equipment or complicated programs. You need to understand exactly what to do differently and precisely how to do it, starting today. That is exactly where we are going next. So what neutralizes the damage? What protects the post-60 spine from the cumulative destruction of prolonged sitting? What gives the permanent? The answer is structured movement interruption. Now, before you say, I've heard about taking breaks from sitting before. Let me stop you right there. Because here is what most people get completely wrong about this. And it is the reason that general advice about moving more has not worked for the millions of seniors who have heard it, nodded, and continued accumulating spinal damage anyway. The advice to simply sit less or move more is not wrong. It is just dangerously incomplete. Because it misses the two variables that determine whether movement actually protects the disc or simply interrupts the sitting without delivering any meaningful spinal recovery at all. Those two variables are frequency and position. Research in spinal biomechanics is remarkably consistent on this point. Breaking sitting with even brief periods of movement every 25 to 30 minutes produces measurably better disc pressure recovery than sitting for 2 hours and then taking a long walk. The disc does not care about the total volume of movement across the day. It responds to the interruption of sustained compression. Short, frequent decompression windows are exponentially more protective than long, infrequent ones. This is why frequency is the critical variable, not total sitting time. Movement allows them to reabsorb fluid and nutrients, which helps maintain their height and shock-absorbing capacity. Sitting without interruption prevents this process from happening effectively. That's why the most effective strategy for protecting the spine is not simply exercising once a day. It's interrupting long sitting periods with small, regular movement. A helpful approach many specialists recommend is the 30-30 movement principle. Every 30 minutes of sitting should be followed by 30 to 60 seconds of standing or gentle movement. Now, the second variable, position, is where most people lose the benefit entirely. Simply standing up from a chair and immediately sitting back down does not decompress the disc. The spine must briefly achieve an extended or neutral position, the lumbar curve restored, the anterior compression released, for the imbibition process to engage. This means the movement interruption must include one of three things: walking, even for 90 seconds, a brief standing lumbar extension, or a specific decompression posture that actively reverses the flexion load the disc has been absorbing. This brief change in posture immediately redistributes pressure across the spine. The lumbar discs decompress slightly, circulation improves around the joints, and the stabilizing muscles of the hips and core reactivate. When sitting is unavoidable, maintaining a neutral spinal position can reduce stress on the lumbar discs. Keeping both feet flat on the floor, allowing the lower back to maintain its natural curve, and avoiding prolonged slouching all help distribute weight more evenly. Simple posture adjustments can dramatically change how the spine experiences pressure. Without the positional component, the interruption is merely a pause in sitting. With it, it is a genuine disc recovery event. There is also another mechanism that movement restores: muscle activation. The muscles surrounding the spine are not just for movement. They function as an internal support system. When these muscles engage regularly, they absorb a portion of the forces that would otherwise travel directly into the spinal discs and joints. Regular movement keeps this muscular support system active. Without it, the spine is forced to bear the full load of body weight on its own. Another powerful protective habit is daily walking. Walking naturally engages the entire support system of the spine, the abdominal muscles, hip stabilizers, and back extensors. These muscles work together to balance the load across the vertebrae so that no single structure absorbs excessive pressure. Even 2 short walks of 10 to 15 minutes per day can significantly improve how forces travel through the spine. These small resets prevent the spine from remaining under constant compression for hours at a time. This is the mechanism that Margaret did not know, that Ronald did not know, that the vast majority of people over 60 sitting in chairs across the world right now do not know. When people first hear that prolonged sitting may be damaging their spine, a few very common reactions appear almost immediately. The first is, "I'm already over 60. Isn't it too late to change anything now?" This is one of the biggest misconceptions about the spine. While certain structural changes can become permanent over time, the function of the spine remains highly adaptable, even in later decades of life. Bones, discs, and supporting muscles continue responding to movement signals well into old age. The goal isn't to reverse time. The goal is to slow or stop further stress from accumulating. And the spine responds remarkably well when movement patterns improve. Here are the 4 critical mistakes that cause most people over 60 to fail at protecting their spine, even after they understand exactly what the problem is. Mistake number 1, waiting until the pain returns before interrupting sitting. This is by far the most common error I see. People feel comfortable. The back is not aching in that moment, and so the interruption gets delayed. 5 minutes becomes 15. 15 becomes 40. And the disc has been under sustained anterior compression for the entire window, silently, without complaint, because the spine has already learned to compensate for the pressure without triggering immediate pain signals. Do not use pain as your timer. Pain is a lagging indicator of disc stress, not a real-time one. By the time discomfort arrives, the compression has already been accumulating for far longer than the disc can safely absorb. Use a clock. Set an alarm. The absence of pain is not permission to keep sitting. It is simply evidence that your spine is still compensating, and compensation has a limit. Mistake number 2, substituting stretching for movement interruption. When many people over 60 believe that a morning stretching routine or an evening yoga session fully offsets the spinal loading of prolonged sitting throughout the day, it does not. Stretching addresses muscular flexibility and range of motion. It does not replicate the imbibition cycle that the disc requires repeatedly throughout the day to maintain its hydration and structural integrity. A 20-minute morning stretch followed by 8 hours of uninterrupted sitting still produces 8 hours of cumulative anterior discompression. The stretch did not bank protective credit for later. The disc responds to what is happening to it right now, not to what happened to it 3 hours ago. Mistake number 3, believing that an ergonomic chair solves the problem. Ergonomic chairs reduce the degree of lumbar flattening during sitting. That is genuinely useful, but they do not eliminate sustained anterior disc loading. They moderate it. A well-supported seated spine is still a compressed spine. The imbibition mechanism still requires positional change and movement to engage. An ergonomic chair without frequent movement interruption is a slower version of the same damage. It is harm reduction, not harm elimination. Do not mistake a better chair for a solution. Mistake number 4, treating movement interruption as optional on low pain days. This is the objection I hear most often in follow-up consultations. I was feeling so good that day, I didn't want to interrupt it. I understand the logic, but structural disc recovery is not correlated with how good you feel on a given day. The disc does not take days off from requiring decompression simply because your pain levels are low. Low pain days are not rest days from the protocol. They are the days the protocol is working and the days it most needs to continue. The solution is not complicated, but it requires consistency above all else, not intensity, not duration, consistency. Here is exactly what I want you to do starting today. This is the precise protocol I give every patient over 60 whose scan shows the early to moderate disc compression pattern we've been discussing. Step 1. Set the 25-minute rule. Without exception, every 25 minutes of sitting, you must stand and move. Not when it is convenient. Not when the program pauses or the chapter ends. Every 25 minutes. Set a phone alarm, a watch timer, or a dedicated interval app. Or the timer is non-negotiable because your spine will not remind you. As we established, the damage accumulates silently. The alarm is the only reliable signal your disc has. When you stand up during your sitting breaks, try simple, gentle movements such as rolling your shoulders backward, slowly straightening your spine, lightly stretching your hips, taking a short walk around the room. These movements restore circulation and reactivate muscles that support the spine. Step 2. Execute the 3-movement decompression sequence. When the timer fires, stand up and perform these 3 things in under 2 minutes. First, walk, even if only to the kitchen and back. 90 seconds of walking is sufficient to initiate the imbibition cycle and begin shifting disc pressure. Second, or perform a standing lumbar extension. Place both hands on your lower back, feet shoulder width apart, and gently arch backward 5 times, slowly and controlled. This directly reverses the anterior compression your disc has been absorbing and repositions the nucleus towards center. Third, take 5 deep diaphragmatic breaths in the standing position. Diaphragmatic breathing gently increases intra-abdominal pressure, which provides a natural decompressive force along the lumbar spine. That sequence, walk, extend, breathe, takes less than 2 minutes. It is the difference between a pause in sitting and a genuine disc recovery event. Step 3. Adjust your primary sitting position. When you return to sitting, make one immediate positional change. Place a small rolled towel or lumbar cushion in the curve of your lower back before you sit down. This single adjustment partially restores the lumbar curve that the chair removes, reducing anterior disc loading by a clinically meaningful degree for the entire duration of that sitting period. You are not eliminating the compression. You are reducing its concentration and its damage potential. When sitting cannot be avoided, posture becomes very important. Try to keep both feet flat on the floor and allow the lower back to maintain its natural curve. Avoid slouching forward or leaning heavily to one side for long periods. Even small posture corrections can change how pressure is distributed across the spine. Step 4. Implement the morning decompression ritual. Before you sit for the first time each day, before breakfast, before the phone, before anything, spend 3 minutes lying face down on a firm surface and performing gentle press-up extensions. Start with your forearms on the floor, progress to your hands if comfortable, and simply allow your lower back to gently extend under the weight of your upper body. This reverses the overnight disc compression that accumulated during sleep and prepares the disc for the loading day ahead. Step 5. Build movement into daily habits. The easiest way to maintain spinal health is to attach movement to routines you already do. Stand while talking on the phone, walk during television commercials, take a short stroll after meals, stretch briefly before returning to your chair. These small actions transform movement into a natural part of your day, rather than something that feels like a separate task. Think of this protocol as giving your spine regular relief from compression. Each time you stand, walk, or stretch, you allow the discs to decompress, the muscles to reactivate, and the spine to regain balance. And over time, these simple habits can make a meaningful difference in how the back feels, moves, and supports you through daily life. Step 6. Track 3 things every morning for 30 days. Rate your morning stiffness on a scale of 1 to 10. Note whether you woke with any radiating pain or nerve sensation, and record whether you completed all movement interruptions the previous day. At the end of 30 days, look back at where you started. The pattern will be unmistakable. Your spine has not given up on you. It is waiting for the right signal. Start sending it today. And if this video helped you see your spine and your daily habits in a way nobody has ever shown you before, please share it with someone over 60 who needs to hear this. A spouse, a sibling, a friend who has been quietly managing back pain and accepting it as inevitable. Your share could genuinely preserve someone's independence. Here is the bottom line. Prolonged, uninterrupted sitting is the single most common and most preventable driver of spinal deterioration after 60, and you can begin disrupting it today with a timer, 2 minutes of movement, and a rolled towel behind your lower back. Start tonight. Set the 25-minute alarm before you sit down for your next meal or your next program. Execute the sequence. Do it again 25 minutes later. Track your morning stiffness for the next 30 days and watch what happens. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from, and tell me, how many hours a day do you currently spend sitting? Your answer helps me understand who needs this information most. Subscribe for more evidence-based guidance every week. Your spine is not finished. Neither are you.